All right, welcome back, everybody. So there is a live footage right now of Air Force One returning on its way to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. The plane had to be turned around. It arrived back at Joint Base Andrews at 11:07 p.m. We are getting word that there was an electrical issue. We were told that the president is okay, that they may have to just switch planes and reroute and go back on its way to Davos. But you're seeing this live look right now from Joint Base Andrews. And by the way, the monumental moment of this is huge because the president was on his way during a time as they discussed the potential acquisition of Greenland, whether or not there would be pressure put on economic and European allies in the form of tariffs, perhaps 10% now, 25% in months ahead. In order to open the talks on whether or not Greenland should be acquired by the United States. But as we're looking at this again, this is live footage, Air Force One having to return back on its way to Davos. We are told that it's an electrical issue. I want to bring in Kellie Meyer, who was with us earlier. Kellie, what can you tell us about the latest right now on Air Force One?
Yeah, so we are checking in with any developments on this. The latest we heard was from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. I was texting with as they were making their way back, this U-turn from Davos back to JBA as they were making their way to Davos due to this minor electrical issue. You see there, of course, the live shot under the wing as we're waiting for the president to deplane. We're told that they're going to move to another aircraft. The president and his team, we know Secretary of State Marco Rubio's on board, his Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, Caroline Leavitt, as well as other members of his team on this plane, going to get off and move to another aircraft and then take off again for Davos. Jesse.
Kellie, in your career as you've been covering this, have you seen this happen before? How standard is this?
I have not seen this happen before. So there are a lot of questions around what exactly happened here. It seemed like when Caroline was texting me that it didn't seem like it was that much of an emergency, that it was minor and they were coming back. But I have never witnessed something like this happening where it's turning around, especially from such a major trip overseas, something that they were getting ready for all day to take this aircraft over there. We do know, in the pool report, Leavitt was joking a little bit about why, okay, maybe let's get those new jets working so we could get the new jets going. But I have never seen anything like this. And of course, when we first got the report, you worry what's going on, what is happening. And then we immediately got that text from Leavitt, put it out there, and then we were able to break this news first that they were returning to Joint Base Andrews to check out what happened and make sure the president could get on his way so he can join in for this World Economic Forum. He's set to speak there tomorrow morning.
And look, we're very, very happy the president is okay, because at first glance, if we tell you that Air Force One is turning around, there could be a nightmare scenario. You're always thinking the worst. So if this is just a minor electrical issue, obviously we'll get details about what happened, how they were able to detect it, and what aircraft they're going to take off now. Talk to me about what the president's schedule was. I mean, again, I tried to emphasize it, but, appearing at the World Economic Forum, all eyes are on the president as we talk about the potential acquisition of Greenland. It's been a major topic of conversation. Whether or not this would lead to some sort of trade dispute with key European allies, the imposition of 10% of tariffs, whether or not European allies would respond with what I just mentioned with Chris Cuomo before about a trade bazooka that would restrict the ability of U.S. companies to do business in certain countries. There was also talk about whether or not they would take away protections from U.S. businesses, intellectual property protections. You're talking about potentially costing billions and billions of dollars. So the president was planning on maybe announcing something or making a statement in Switzerland. What can you tell us?
Yeah, and you see the pool reporters kind of moving around. They may be shifting to another exit there as they're trying to see the president deplane off of the Air Force One and move to the other aircraft. But like you said, I mean, it's an unprecedented trip. But what he was going to do tomorrow was deliver this speech, but also surrounding the World Economic Forum was center stage on Greenland. That was the focus, the future of Greenland. There's a lot of questions and a lot of drama going into this forum, into this week as the president visits, there's a lot of world leaders that want to get a word in with the president and really push him away from this idea of acquiring Greenland. We saw the president sharing those texts we were talking about with world leaders. We even saw Macron in that text saying the president should come to Paris before he returns back to the United States to talk with other leaders, to have dinner with him in Paris. They're really trying to get him away from this idea of getting Greenland. But this is something that he says, as he told Arkady Pavlich in that exclusive interview, that he needs for national security, that he needs it for the Golden Dome. And it doesn't seem like something he's going to back away from. So what he's looking for maybe is some sort of compromise with these leaders. But what I will say is we know with President Trump, the conversations are a lot different when he does these conversations in person. They seem to be a lot more pleasant. He is friendly with the world leaders. So there could be a lot of talk when you're online or away from each other. But it does seem when he gets together with these leaders, it is pleasant and they are able to work through these issues in many ways.
And again, it also becomes the question of whether or not he can achieve the goal that he's looking to achieve, whether it's not through purchasing Greenland. I mean, if you're talking about perhaps early warning systems for missile defense, or you're talking about the placement of certain vessels or monitoring certain vessels, can that be achieved in another way? So obviously, you know, he's a negotiator, and it would have been very interesting to see what that conversation will be. But again, to be clear, by all accounts, Kellie, he plans on going back to Davos. I mean, just to be clear, as we're watching this, any sign of the president? Do we know if he has deplaned? Do we know where he is at this point?
It looks like those cameras, the pool of reporters that we saw were moving around. It looks like they shifted them further back, it seems. We haven't seen the president, at least as far as I can tell, deplane. But we do expect him to get off of this plane, move to another one, and then go on to Davos, is the plan. But of course, this is pushing the schedule back even more. We don't know how long this will take, and we don't know the exact details around what this minor electrical issue that Caroline Leavitt told us really is, and we don't know the details around that. So a lot we're waiting for. Checking my phone here for any updates from the White House pool that's with him right now. But he may come out and talk to reporters. I mean, anything could happen. He could share what was going on. But we are expecting him to go on to Davos tonight, and we'll see how that changes his plans for his speech tomorrow.
Right, and you know, to reassure the public that everything's okay. You know, it's interesting that this is happening because the whole night is about year one in perspective. I mean, that was what Katie's interview with the president was about, right? Trying to think about what had happened this past year, a preview of what we can expect. He had a full day today, and also his press conference talking about what he touted as the achievements of the administration. One thing to mention, you said that he may deplane and go to a different plane. Do we know what that a different plane may be? Because everybody assumes, oh, it's just, you know, Air Force One. It's not like you get rebooked on a Delta flight. I mean, what exactly would be the other plane?
Yeah, there are other planes. So, for example, there is the bigger Air Force One, which would be the one he was taking to Davos. That's the one we take when we go down with him to Mar-a-Lago. But there's a smaller plane that he would take, for example, when he goes to Bedminster, New Jersey. So that could be something that they could take instead. So that could be an option. They're both United States of America planes. They both have the blue and the white. They both are essentially Air Force One, but a bigger and smaller version. So that could be the one that I would imagine they're moving to. I also know there's, of course, the bigger plane, the Doomsday plane that we were just on with Secretary Hegseth, but that likely, I don't even think that might be at JBA. That moves around from air base around the country. So that might not be available as an option for him to get on board.
And by the way, I'm being told that his speech, I believe, tomorrow was at 8:30 a.m. Now, obviously, that'll change or could change. You're talking about the President of the United States speaking about a very pivotal issue that could affect European and American markets. And the purpose of this visit to the World Economic Forum, Kellie, was it just about Greenland? What else was the president planning to speak to European allies about?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it really isn't about Greenland, like on the surface. Greenland has become quickly the focus for many people tuning in to the World Economic Forum, but he's actually going there, and I was just talking with a White House official about this. He's going there to talk about his accomplishments from year one, he says, and also to talk about what he's going to do in year two. And I'm told a lot of that has to do with making housing more affordable. We were talking with Kevin Hassett last week, his top trade advisor. He was saying to watch for some details on plans around housing, and then a White House official telling me tonight that that is what he's going to go into in his speech, which is really interesting because then that ties to the domestic issues. It also ties to the midterms. It ties to the focus he's been placing on housing, healthcare, affordability in general going into the midterms. That's really the focus for him tomorrow.
No, absolutely. I mean, the stakes are quite high with this trip to Switzerland, and the World Economic Forum is quite the stage to be setting for, Chapter 2, the second year. Kellie, I know you're going to be watching to see the latest what's happening here. We're going to try to jump back with a live feed.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.